that's still owed on that house.
Going into the situation, you have two choices. If you let the house go to foreclosure and the bid at the foreclosure sale by the bank is less than the amount of the debt, and the bank supports that position by getting an appraisal because market values have declined. If it goes to sale, you've kind of locked in that situation and you're exposed to the liability. Down the road, if they chase you, your remedy is potentially settlement, or bankruptcy is another way that we can discharge those debts. Bankruptcy up front is an excellent tool. People sometimes shun at the word bankruptcy, but right now, if you look at our marketplace in a situation where you're underwater in your house, you're carrying credit card debt, where the credit card companies have virtually cut off all available credit to the same people, and they've boosted the interest rates. You know, I've seen 29, 32% on these credit cards. Bankruptcy is a great tool to discharge that debt. But short sale is another one going in that I represent a lot of clients where we have a situation where they're underwater in the home, they have income, so and they don't have that much credit card debt. So the concern is we want to get rid of this house, but we don't want to end up going through foreclosure and being sued on it. Well, there you try a short sale. And what you do is you then, in effect, bluff letting the house go to foreclosure by not paying. You then list the house with the broker. You find a buyer. Suppose you find a buyer for that $400,000 mortgage at $290,000. You submit it to the lender, and you try and get the lender to agree to take the $290,000 and release you from the amount of the debt. Now, what's critical is that you get the release. And a lot of people out there think they're short selling their home. The lender issues an approval letter, and if you read the approval, like you and I would read the approval letter,
sure.
The approval letter says in fine print that we're not releasing you from the mortgage. Well, that we just throw away and say, no dice, we're not going to sell the home. But if you do get a valid short sale, the lender sometimes will either discharge all the debt, or sometimes the lender will come back to you and say, sign a promissory note for $20,000 of the deficiency, no interest over 20 years. That comes out to like a $100 a month payment. That could be sometimes a good deal from the standpoint of you're getting out from $150,000 deficiency on a house, maybe not a bad way to go. When we get that situation, we negotiate. Whatever the lender comes back with initially, if they say they want $40,000, we say no, all we have is $5,000. And then you whittle that down, like, we negotiate as lawyers, and we get that down to the point where we decide, is it a good deal or not a good deal?
Right.
If it's a good deal, you sell the house. If it's not, you let it go to foreclosure and consider bankruptcy.
Now, I understand that there are some instances where we have these sheriff sales, and at the sheriff sale, that's where not only the bank, but I guess other people can bid on that property as well, correct?
Anybody can bid.
Anybody can bid. Can the person who's the owner of the house that's being foreclosed bid also?
Actually, the owner of the house could bid, but when you bid in that situation as the owner, you wouldn't bid in your own name.
Why not?
Because if you're bidding less than the amount of the debt, the lender still can come back at you and sue you. And when you bid at the foreclosure sale, you have to bid for cash. So let's suppose you owe the lender $200,000, you bid $100,000, and your bid is the high bid. If you buy the house for $100,000, you now own that house free and clear, but the lender can sue you for the $100,000, and he's got an asset to go after.
And in fact,
so
at
you'd
the
have to be
sheriff
careful
sales,
about that.
my understanding is that at a sheriff sale, when you buy it, you've got to pay for it right
You
then
gotta
and
pay it
there
right
on
there.
the spot.
Right there.
Right, so you've got to bring in either a certified bank check or some teller's check, something, not just your normal everyday check, but you got to bring in something, either cash or something that is the equivalent of cash, that there's no question that that's good. Is that correct?
Right, and for that reason, 99.9% of the time, the only one bidding at the foreclosure sale is the lender. Because the lender doesn't even have to, the lender can bid the amount that it's owed without putting out any money because it's already owed that. So usually the lender's the only one that shows up to bid.
Okay. We also have a situation, what about somebody's relatives? Can somebody's relatives
They could,
do it?
sure.
But they'd have the same problem? Rather the owner would, is that correct?
The owner would still be exposed on the deficiency, but that's not a bad strategy. If you can get a relative to come up with the cash to bid, it can be a good strategy. That relative could also buy the house from the bank after the foreclosure sale. It's all a question of, right now it's difficult to get financing. So if you've got someone who's got cash in the bank that can go and make that bid, there's leverage and there's good things that you can come out of it. Normally, people that are coming in to see me, that's usually not, most often it's not an option.
All right. Now, very briefly, I read something really horrendous. There's a Sergeant Hurley who was in the Marines out in Iraq fighting for this country in the war against terror. And he had a mortgage, and they went out and they foreclosed him, even though there's a law called the Service Members Civil Relief Act, which is a federal law that prevents them from doing that. How do you protect yourself in that case?
The problem with the lending industry is
well, you know what?
It's pathetic.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a pathetic situation, and there's no excuse for it. And there are remedies. The lending industry would say it's just an occasional error. The problem is there's such arrogance that pervades that entire industry, the way in which they process their files, the lack of apathy or sympathy for the people that are being put out of their homes. They make all sorts of mistakes, and then when you call them on the mistakes, they just say, oh, it just happened this one time.
Well, you know what? That's a big problem. We're going to have to save that for another show. I want to thank you so much for coming, and I think you've been very informative. I think if we've learned anything in this interview, it's that if you get a foreclosure, and that may happen to any of us, first thing you do, go to a lawyer. Act immediately. Don't put your head in the sand, because you've got to protect yourself. That's number one. And number two is, see me next week on Schwartz's Law.
If you have a legal issue, past or present, that you want advice on from Schwartz's Law, or a legal question you want Schwartz's Law to tackle, call 586-231-6000. Schwartz's Law.